Did you know that more than 90% of viewers don't subscribe to our channel? If you're watching this and haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that subscribe button. We don't run ads on our videos, so we don't earn anything from them. Every subscription, every like, every comment truly means the world to us. Your support keeps our passion alive and motivates us to create more. We'd also love to hear from you. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Let's start our story. Story number 1. Owen had been driving trucks for almost 20 years before anything truly strange ever happened to him. He had weathered long winters, blown tires on narrow bridges, and enough late-night detours to fill a small atlas with memories. He knew the western mountain passes, as well as some people knew their own neighborhoods. Nothing frightened him there. The mountains were just another part of the job. It was late in the season when his dispatcher routed him through an older pass in the Pacific Northwest. A storm farther south had closed the main interstate, and the company needed a refrigerated load in Spokane by morning. The alternate route was a thin gray line on the map, a 2-lane mountain highway that crossed a high pass and dropped east through forest and rock. The weather forecast promised light snow, nothing unusual. Owen had chained up in far worse. He shrugged when the message popped up on his in-cab display. Use Alt Route Y47 over Coal Ridge. Expect delays. By the time he reached the turnoff for Highway 47, the clocks on his dash showed a little after midnight. The big interstate behind him was still busy, a chain of white and red lights fading in the mirror, but the ramp toward the old highway fell quickly into darkness. He eased the truck up the ramp, watching the familiar green signs turn fewer and older. The pavement narrowed. Reflective posts became occasional, instead of constant. Dense trees pressed up against both sides, their branches heavy with the first dusting of snow. The GPS map zoomed out, then froze. No signal. That didn't bother him much. Mountain passes had always been bad for service. He drove by feel and experience more than any screen. The only thing that bothered him, just a little, was how quiet it became once he left the interstate. It was the kind of silence that swallowed the hum of the tires and the steady knocking of the engine until those sounds felt small, like they could be muted at any moment. The snow thickened as he climbed. Flakes swirled through the beams of his headlights, not yet sticking hard to the asphalt, but spinning in strange patterns that made distance hard to judge. He turned the CB volume up in case of any chatter. Static. Most drivers didn't bother with these smaller roads. They were steeper, slower, and unpredictable. But the company wouldn't ask him to take it if it wasn't safe, he told himself. And there were still faint signs of regular traffic. Fresh tire tracks, the occasional reflector glinting ahead. Around one gentle bend, a small brown sign emerged from the shadows on the right. It was old and leaning slightly, the paint faded by years of storms. Coal Ridge Pass, Elev, 6,843 feet. Use caution. Icy conditions. Beneath it, someone had nailed a wooden plank with hand-painted letters, in memory of those lost. March 7, 1998. Owen frowned, but kept rolling. Memorial signs were common on high passes. One bad crash, one careless moment, and a whole stretch of road could carry a quiet history forever. A few miles later, he spotted a tiny turnout on the right, a crude rest area with a single street lamp buzzing weakly over a rusted snowplow. The light cast a yellow circle on cracked pavement and old tire marks. He debated stopping, just to step out and stretch his legs, but the storm was still building and the road ahead was unfamiliar. Better to keep moving, he decided. Better not to stand still too long in a place like that. As the truck drifted past the turnout, something caught his eye. Along the far edge of the rest area, near a warped wooden guardrail, a series of deep tire tracks cut through the slush and vanished at the drop-off. There was no sign of impact on the wood, no broken boards, no scattered debris, just the tracks, ending at the edge as if the vehicle had simply driven off into the darkness beyond. He kept going, telling himself the angle was deceiving, that the tracks probably curled back toward the road, and his eyes had just lost them. But the image of those prints, dark, fresh-looking, abrupt, clung to his thoughts. The grade steepened, and his engine began to strain against the incline. Snow now gathered in thin lines along the center of the road, building in the grooves left by earlier vehicles. The trees pulled back a little, revealing more of the sky. But there were no stars, no moon, just a heavy blanket of cloud pressing close. About 10 minutes past the little turnout, he saw them. 2 red taillights glowed faintly through the snow ahead, bobbing slightly with the motion of a truck rounding the curves. The shape was barely visible, the boxy silhouette of a tractor and trailer hugging the road. Owen felt a subtle comfort at the sight. Another driver. He wasn't alone on this narrow highway after all. He eased off the throttle to maintain a safe distance. The other rig was running a bit slower than he liked. But passing on these curves in the dark, with the snow thickening, wasn't worth the risk. At first, nothing seemed strange about the truck ahead. But as the minutes passed, Owen began to notice details in the shifting beams of his headlights. The trailer ahead was older, with a faded white surface broken by long vertical streaks. On the back doors, an outdated company logo was barely visible, a stylized mountain and the words Northline Freight in peeling blue letters. He hadn't seen that company name in years. He could remember a time when those trailers moved up and down the interstates regularly, but at some point, they had simply stopped appearing. Companies failed, merged, or rebranded all the time. It wasn't exactly mysterious. Still, something about the way the letters seemed to retreat from the light bothered him. He reached for the CB mic, clicked it, and spoke into the quiet cab. Northline truck on 47 eastbound, you got a copy? The only answer was static, soft and constant, like a distant whisper that never formed words. Owen cleared his throat and tried again. Eastbound on Coleridge coming up behind you. How's the road looking up there? The static shifted very slightly. There was a brief stutter of sound, almost like someone breathing too close to a microphone, then nothing. He put the mic back on its hook slowly. There could be plenty of reasons for the silence. The other driver might have his CB turned off, or the radio could be dead. Still, every driver knew that on roads like this, that little bit of communication could mean everything. Most left their radios on at least low, just in case. The climb continued. The red lights ahead remained just far enough away that he never saw the cab clearly, only the vague shape of the trailer swaying slightly on the turns. After another mile, new signs began appearing larger, with bright reflective paint. Slide area. Next 3 miles. Watch for falling rock. Reduce speed. Clusters of small wooden crosses appeared at the roadside now. Some with faded plastic flowers, some bare. They looked pale in his headlights, pressed close to the guardrails, half buried in snow. At one particular curve, the guardrail looked newer than the rest, its metal relatively unscarred. Just a bit beyond it, though, stood a squat row of memorials unlike the others. 10 or 12 wooden crosses in a tight group, their tops dusted with snow. Someone had left a plastic wreath there, the green faded almost gray. The air inside the cab seemed to cool by a few degrees as he passed them. His digital clock flickered. It had been reading 12:47 a.m. the last time he looked. Now it blinked, reset itself, and for a moment showed 3:16. Then, slowly, the digits rolled backward 3:15, 3:14 before zeroing out and starting again from 12. He stared at it, irritated. The wiring must have jolted over a bump. It happened, but he hadn't hit a bump hard enough to notice. The CB crackled softly. Eastbound, all lanes blocked. Repeat, all lanes blocked. The voice was faint, washed in static, as if coming from very far away. Owen leaned toward the radio and turned the dial a little. Say again, eastbound? The reply was clearer, but only barely. Pile up on the ridge. We got at least 10 trucks. Visibility's gone. It sounded like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. There was something old in the texture of the recording, a distant echo. He felt the hairs on his arms rise. A new voice broke in, higher, panicked. They're still coming around the curve, can't stop them, they don't see the transmission cut off mid-sentence. Only static remained, flowing evenly, unaffected by his fingers tightening on the dial. He glanced at the truck ahead. The red taillights glowed calmly in the snow, no brake lights, no sign of distress. The trailer rolled steady as a metronome. Coleridge eastbound? He tried. Is this current? You got a date on that? No answer. The snow thickened into a dense curtain that reduced the world to his headlights and those 2 red lights ahead. The road seemed to float, disconnected from the mountain around it. His hands tightened on the wheel, feeling the slight pull of ice beneath the tires. As he rounded another curve, something shifted in the scene ahead. For just an instant, as if a film had skipped a frame, the world beyond his windshield was wrong. The truck ahead appeared sideways in the road, its trailer jackknifed across the center line. Additional headlights filled the darkness, too many to belong to one or two vehicles. They were scattered, some high, some low, some tilted at impossible angles as if hanging in midair. A haze of snow and light swirled around them, making it impossible to tell what was road and what was sky. Then the image snapped back. The red taillights ahead were once again aligned neatly in front of him, making their slow way up the grade. The road was clear, the lines faintly visible beneath the snow. He blinked hard and felt cold sweat on his back. Exhaustion, he told himself. The long day. He should have stopped at the last real rest area hours ago. His brain was playing tricks in the storm. The digits on the clock glowed softly. 12:47. He glanced at his watch. 2:39. A quiet unease settled over him like another layer of snow. Minutes, or maybe longer, passed. The road narrowed as it neared the crest of the pass. Overhead, a sign loomed suddenly out of the darkness, lit by his headlights. Coleridge Summit, 6,843 feet. Chains required beyond this point. The red taillights ahead dimmed as the other truck slowed. Owen downshifted, feeling the engine respond. The summit was just a gentle curve, nothing as sharp as the lower sections. Once over the top, it would all be downhill to the east. Halfway through the curve, his sleeper berth door banged once behind him. It was a sharp, hollow sound, like someone had shoved it from the inside. Owen jolted, nearly pulling the wheel. The door should have been latched firmly. He always locked it before driving. The noise came again, a single hard knock and then silence. His mouth became dry. He kept his eyes on the windshield, knuckles pale against the steering wheel. Outside, the wind picked up, rocking the cab gently. The CB crackled without warning. They didn't slow down in time. They just kept coming. The same voice as before, but this time it felt closer, threaded with a hollow resignation. There was no panic now, only disbelief. Owen swallowed and forced himself to speak, his voice rough. Breaker 1 to 9, Coleridge eastbound. Anyone else hearing this? Static responded, smooth and unbroken. The summit passed. The road straightened for a short distance before beginning its descent toward the eastern valleys. The truck ahead picked up speed again, the red lights bobbing slightly as it settled into the downgrade. For a moment, everything seemed almost normal again. Then, gradually, he began to notice something strange about the scenery. The same leaning pine on the right, the same jagged rock face on the left, the same small wooden cross half buried in the snow, a faded strip of blue fabric tied around its center. A minute later, at least, it felt like a minute he saw them again. The same pine, the same rock, the same cross. He pressed his tongue against the back of his teeth, counting seconds under his breath as he drove. 51. 52. 53. There. The same bend. The same view. The same cross. It was subtle, but once he recognized it, he couldn't deny it. The world outside his cab was repeating in a tight, unnerving loop. The road circling through the same 100 yards over and over, each cycle almost perfect. Almost. On the third pass, the strip of blue fabric on the cross fluttered more violently, whipped by a wind he could not hear through the glass. On the fourth, there were two crosses. The truck ahead never wavered, never adjusted, never seemed to notice. The red lights remained in their place, leading him steadily toward something his mind could not quite see. His heart thudded against his ribs. He lifted his foot, letting the truck begin to slow, inching back from the silent Northline rig. The instant he did, the CB hissed again. Don't stop in the curve. They'll hit you. They don't see you. Different voice, older, calmer. A warning that did not seem meant for him, and yet landed squarely on his shoulders. The memory of the memorial sign near the start of the pass rose unbidden in his mind. The 7th of March, 1998. In memory of those lost. He took a deep, slow breath and did something he had rarely done on mountain roads. He turned off the CB completely. The cab fell into a pure, heavy silence, broken only by the soft roar of the heater and the hum of the engine. Ahead, the red lights climbed another faint rise. On the 5th pass, There were 3 crosses at the edge of the road. The snow thinned suddenly, like a curtain lifting. The clouds broke in ragged patches, and for the first time that night, pale starlight glimmered above the cliffs. The road widened, shifting into a broader curve that clung to the mountain's side. A sheer drop yawned on the right beyond the guardrail. A deep, dark valley swallowing any hint of what lay below. Signs crowded the shoulder here, their messages urgent. Slow to 25 miles per hour. Icy curve ahead. Chain inspection area 1 mile. The red taillights ahead didn't slow. If anything, they seemed to drift closer to the guardrail as the trailer swayed gently. Owen's instincts screamed. His foot moved to the brake, but he hesitated. Those ghostly conversations on the CB. The looping stretch of road. The multiplying crosses. The memorial to an accident that had claimed multiple trucks. Every part of him suddenly knew, with a deep, irrational certainty, that this was the curve. The one where it had happened. The one where the pileup had begun. And the North Line truck ahead was driving straight into it, following the same path it had taken all those years ago. His engine brake growled softly as he reduced speed, dropping lower than the posted limit, letting a wide gap open between them. The more distance, the better. If the road was replaying some old catastrophe that was insane, but nothing that night felt sane, then he wanted no part of it. The North Line rig reached the sharpest part of the curve. For an instant, Owen saw its side clearly, lit by his own headlights. The faded logo, the streaks of rust, the grime built up over countless winters. Then, in one fluid, horrifying motion, the trailer slid. It didn't bounce or jerk the way a real skid might have. It simply glided sideways, cutting across the lane like a shadow. The headlights at the front dipped, and the entire rig vanished into the night, dropping beyond the guardrail without a sound. There was no crash, no scream of metal, no shower of sparks. The truck ahead was simply there one moment and gone the next, leaving an empty road and a guardrail untouched by any damage. Owen's breath caught in his throat. His foot hovered over the brake pedal, not daring to press too hard on the ice. He eased around the curve at a crawl, eyes fixed on the space where the other truck had disappeared. There was nothing below but darkness, no glow of taillights, no shattered glass reflecting his beams, only a void, so deep it seemed to swallow light. On the far side of the curve, just beyond the reach of his headlights, something shifted. A single pair of red taillights blinked into existence, steady and unchanged, as if they had never left the road. They floated on ahead, rounding the next bend, leading the way down the mountain. His clock flickered again, 3:16 a.m., the same time it had flashed to at the memorial. He drove the rest of the descent in a kind of quiet trance, never quite catching up to those lights, never losing them completely. They hovered always just beyond the edge of certainty, present but untouchable. When the grade finally eased and the pines gave way to lower, gentler hills, the snow thinned further. Farmhouse lights began to appear in distant fields. The sky lightened slightly with the coming dawn, and just like that, the red taillights were gone. One moment they were there, the next, the highway ahead was empty. By the time he reached the truck stop on the outskirts of Spokane, his hands were stiff and sore from gripping the wheel. He parked under the harsh white glow of the lot lights and sat for a moment, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine. Inside, the world felt almost offensively normal. Fluorescent lights, the smell of coffee, the murmur of televisions, and quiet laughter from a table of drivers swapping stories. He poured himself a cup of coffee and wandered to a corner where a corkboard was crowded with business cards, delivery notices, and old photographs yellowing at the edges. One photo near the top caught his eye. It showed a row of trucks parked along a mountain turnout, all facing the same way. The picture had been taken years ago. The trucks were older models, their paint schemes outdated. At the bottom, someone had written in blue ink, "Coal Ridge Pass, Memorial Run 1999. Owen leaned closer. Near the center of the line, slightly blurry, was a familiar logo. North Line Freight, printed on the side of a cab-over trailer. The truck looked almost exactly like the one he had followed through the snow. What made his throat tighten, though, was not that rig, but the faint shape at the far left edge of the photo, barely in frame, only half visible. It was a modern tractor, long-nosed and painted in the same white and blue scheme as the one he had left just outside in the lot. Same make, Same model. Same company decal. His company, the angle of the cab, the curve of the windshield, it looked like his truck. But the photo was dated a full decade before he had even earned his commercial license. He stared at it until the edges of the picture blurred. Somewhere outside, a truck engine, revved, rattling the windows. Later, in his cab, he searched online for Coal Ridge Pass accident, the 7th of March, 1998. The connection was weak, pages loading slowly. But eventually, an old article appeared from a local paper. Multi-truck collision kills 12 on Coal Ridge Pass. Blizzard conditions and low visibility blamed. There were no graphic details, just quiet descriptions of blocked lanes, scattered vehicles, and the long, slow work of clearing the wreckage. A photo at the bottom showed a tangle of trucks along a snowy curve, their shapes barely visible through the storm. Front and center, one trailer stood out, its logo just clear enough to read, Northline Freight. According to the article, the first call about the accident had gone out over CB radio at 3:16 a.m. Owen shut the screen off and sat in the dark cab for a long time, listening to the distant sounds of idling engines. On future runs, whenever dispatch suggested the Coleridge detour, he refused with a calm, firm voice that left no room for argument. Newer drivers sometimes joked about the old stories of accidents up there, about ghost trucks and haunted curves. He never corrected them, never added his own story. But on certain winter nights, on lonely stretches of other highways, he would glance in his mirror at the glow of his own taillights, reflected faintly on the road, and imagine another driver somewhere behind him, following red lights through the snow, hearing voices on a crackling CB, and wondering if the path ahead was entirely his own. Story number 2. Marcus liked to say he'd spent more nights staring at white lines than at his own bedroom ceiling. After 13 years hauling freight across the Southeast, he knew the personality of each major highway the way some people knew their coworkers. Some roads felt open and relaxed, others were impatient, always pushing him to drive faster. A few stretches, though, had a tension to them, like a conversation where something important was left unsaid. Interstate 71 through Lawson County was one of those stretches. He only crossed that part of the state a couple of times a year, usually when the company landed a last-minute load or a storm shut down his usual route. It wasn't the scenery, the low pine forests and gas stations were as ordinary as anywhere. It was the way local drivers talked about it when they thought no one from out of town was listening. That night, he rolled into a truck stop just before midnight, needing fuel and coffee before pushing on through the darkest hours. Humidity clung to the air, making the scattered insects swarm beneath the parking lot lights like pieces of ash in slow motion. Inside, the diner section was almost empty. A single family sat in a corner booth, their 2 kids asleep, with their faces pressed into the vinyl seats. A man in a sheriff's uniform nursed a cup of coffee at the counter, his hat resting beside him. The TV in the corner droned quietly about the weather. Marcus ordered his fuel on the card reader, then stepped up to the coffee pots. As he filled his thermos, the clerk behind the register glanced at the logo on his jacket. "Running overnight?" she asked, her tone friendly but tired. "Yeah, trying to clear Lawson County before dawn," he said. The sheriff looked over his shoulder. "You headed east?" he asked. "Eastbound, yeah. Hoping to make Germany Falls before I rack out." "Why?" The sheriff studied him for a moment, as if weighing whether to say anything. His eyes were bloodshot but sharp. "Probably already heard this," he began slowly. "But don't stop between mile 203 and 214 unless you have to. No shoulders out there worth a thing, no lighting. Folks get clipped pretty easy." Marcus nodded, used to vague warnings about bad stretches of road. "I'll keep it moving," he said. The sheriff hesitated, then added, "And if you see anyone walking out there, just call it in. Don't pull over." He said it with an odd steadiness, as though repeating something he'd said many times before. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What, like hitchhikers?" The clerk gave a little shiver and pretended to busy herself with receipts. "Lots of wrecks," the sheriff said. "Bad visibility. Folks think they're helping and end up part of the problem. Just keep rolling. Let us handle it." There was a weight to the words that didn't quite match the explanation, but Marcus didn't push. Truckers and small-town law respected each other best when they didn't ask too many questions. He topped off his thermos, nodded a polite thanks, and headed back out into the warm night. His rig waited in the far corner of the lot, a long white trailer glistening faintly in the lights. He did a quick walk around, checking the tires and lights by habit. Everything looked normal. The familiarity of it soothed whatever faint unease the sheriff's warning had stirred. Back in the cab, he adjusted his seat, flipped on his running lights, and eased out onto the access road. The highway on-ramp arced out of the darkness ahead, like a pale tongue. Once he merged onto the interstate, the world narrowed to the twin ribbons of lane lines stretching into the dark. Midnight had passed. Most of the cars had thinned out to a rare sedan or pickup truck gliding past. The engine's low vibration and the soft whoosh of air around the cab settled into a steady rhythm. Mile marker 197 slid by on the right, a reflective green blur in his peripheral vision. He thought about the sheriff's voice. Not what he'd said, but how he'd said it. That careful calm, like someone reciting a rule they knew most people weren't going to like. Marcus sipped his coffee. Mile 201. The trees thickened, crowding closer to the asphalt. The overhead lights that had occasionally appeared near exits were gone now. Only his own headlights cut the darkness. The sky to his right was a depthless black, no farmhouses or distant town glow, just an expanse of nothing. He rolled down his window an inch to let in fresh air. The night pressed against the glass, warm and still. Mile 203. He checked his mirrors. Empty behind him, except for the faint suggestion of another truck's lights far back, maybe half a mile. Ahead, the road curved gently, vanishing into the dark. The cruise control held him at a steady 62. His log showed plenty of drive time left. Every rational part of him knew that this was just another anonymous piece of highway, like hundreds he'd passed before. Still, when a green reflective sign appeared in the distance, his eyes tracked it more closely than usual. Mile 204. He passed it, watching it drop back into his mirror, its reflection shrinking. That was when he saw her. On the narrow strip of grass between the eastbound and westbound lanes, a figure stood motionless, turned slightly toward his side of the highway. For a split second, she was only a pale shape in his peripheral vision. Then the headlights brushed across her just enough to give her form. A woman, maybe mid-30s, wearing a dark blazer and skirt like she'd just stepped out of an office. One hand held the strap of a laptop bag slung over her shoulder. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, low ponytail that the wind barely touched. No car near her. No hazard lights on either side of the road. Just her, standing in the wide, grassy median at midnight on a lonely stretch of interstate. He was already past her by the time his mind registered how wrong the scene was. His foot twitched toward the brake, but the sheriff's words came back in a rush. Don't stop between 203 and 214. If you see anyone walking, don't pull over. Let us handle it. His hands tightened on the wheel. You're imagining it, he muttered. Just a trick of the light. Someone on the other side of the road. He checked his mirror again. She was still there. The reflection was small now, but clear enough. Her figure still standing in the median, watching his taillights, the bag strap cutting a dark line across her shoulder. She hadn't moved an inch. A cold line traced its way down his spine. He flicked his eyes to the dash cam. The tiny screen glowed faintly, showing the empty road ahead from the camera's forward angle. It was set to record on a loop, overwriting itself every few hours. If he'd really just passed someone standing out there, the dashcam would have caught it. On impulse, he reached over and tapped the button to play back the last 30 seconds. The screen stuttered, then rewound. He watched his own headlights roll smoothly along the same stretch of highway, the same green glow of mile 204 inches the distance. The footage showed the median as his truck drew even with it. No one, just grass and a dark blur of trees beyond. He glanced at the mirror again. The median was out of sight now, swallowed by the curve. The strange chill didn't leave. If anything, it settled deeper. Could have just missed her, he said under his breath, though he knew the camera had a wider angle than his own eyes. Mile 206 came and went. The distant truck behind him had drawn a little closer now, its headlights a pair of faint orbs in the far mirror. The road remained empty ahead. He tried to distract himself by focusing on the numbers on his display, on the idea of coffee at the next big stop, on tomorrow's delivery schedule. But a restless awareness kept circling back to the memory of that woman standing perfectly still in the median, as if she'd been waiting for someone. Particular, mile 208. The temperature gauge on his dashboard flickered down a couple of notches, then back up, like a heartbeat skipping. He frowned. The outside air hadn't changed that quickly. He turned the heater dial slightly, more out of habit than need. Something moved in his passenger side mirror. Not a full shape. Just a suggestion of motion at the very edge of the glass, where the reflection of the road met the darkness of the cab. It was like catching the hint of someone leaning forward in a seat just outside his field of view. Marcus's neck prickled. He forced himself to keep his eyes on the road ahead. "You're alone," he said quietly. "Just you and the load." His voice sounded too loud in the cab. The radio, which had been playing a soft thread of music from some late-night station, crackled and cut out for half a second, then came back with a slight hiss. The song had jumped forward by what felt like a verse. He checked the clock. 12:41. He was sure it had been 12:41 10 minutes ago. The shoulder to the right narrowed, nothing but a rough gravel lip sloping down into trees. He imagined a sedan pulled over there with its lights off. Someone waiting for help that never came. The image almost pushed his foot to the brake. Almost. Mile 209 appeared. This sign was slightly bent, leaning toward the road like it had taken a hit years ago and never been properly straightened. As his headlights washed over it, a voice spoke from the passenger seat. "You passed me," it said, calm and conversational. Marcus's fingers went numb for a heartbeat. The wheel drifted half an inch, then he dragged it back to center, his eyes locked on the road. He did not look toward the passenger seat. The air beside him felt like a space where cold had gathered, not the easy chill of the AC, but a denser, more focused cold, as if the warmth of that patch of air had been drained away. "I watched you go by," the voice continued. It was a woman's voice, low and controlled, with the faintest trace of a city accent. "You were doing 62. You didn't even tap your brakes." He swallowed, throat dry. "I don't give rides," Marcus said, surprising himself with how steady he sounded. "Company policy." There was a soft rustle beside him, like fabric settling. "Of course," she said. "Safety first." He could see her now only as a slight shape in his peripheral vision, a darker mass against the passenger window. If he turned his head even a little, the illusion would be complete, and he knew some part of him would have to accept that there was someone riding next to him in a cab he'd locked from the inside. He focused on his hands instead. They were steady on the wheel, though a faint tremor rippled through his arms. "Long night?" she asked. "You could say that. Where are you headed?" He took a breath. "Germany Falls, distribution center." She made a small sound like approval. "You'll pass 3 more exits before you get there," she said. 2 truck stops. 1 rest area with a broken vending machine in the back. You won't stop at any of them. The matter-of-fact way she said it made his scalp prickle. He glanced at the GPS screen. The next exit was indeed listed 8 miles ahead, then 2 clustered closer together. He hadn't decided yet whether to push past them or not. "How do you know that?" he asked. "You don't like stopping once you're in the middle stretch," she replied lightly. "You'd rather push through the hard part and rest when the sky starts to turn gray. You don't like the way some truck stops feel just before dawn." That was true. Not a fact he'd ever said out loud. The truck behind him had drawn closer. Its headlights were clearer in the side mirror now, a constant dull glow. For the first time, Marcus was glad to see another vehicle. Whatever was in his cab, it felt thinner with another set of lights behind him, like attention divided it. He risked a glance toward the passenger seat. There she was, the same woman he'd seen in the median, now seated with her hands folded neatly in her lap, laptop bag resting between her shoes. She looked solid, not translucent or faded, her skin a normal color in the dashboard's glow. Her blazer was wrinkled along the shoulders, as if she'd been wearing it for many hours. Her eyes, though, were too still. They didn't track the motion of the road reflected faintly in the glass. They were focused entirely on him. "You're not supposed to be here," he said quietly. "No one ever thinks I am," she replied, "until they stop." He turned back to the windshield, jaw tight. "I'm not stopping." "That's good." She watched his hands. "They told you, didn't they? At the last stop. Not to pull over, between mile 203 and 214. His mouth felt dry. "Something like that. They always say it like that," she mused. "Like it's about traffic, or visibility. It's easier than saying they don't know what happens here, only that people disappear." The truck behind him flashed its high beams once. Not a warning, exactly more like the impatient nudge drivers gave each other when they were ready to pass. Marcus eased his rig slightly to the right, giving the other truck room to go around on the left. In the mirror, He watched it draw level. It was a long blue tractor with a white, refrigerated trailer, company name in block letters along the side. As it came even with his cab, Marcus glanced over, hoping to see the other driver's face, some normal human presence. The passenger seat beside the other driver was not empty. A woman sat there, posture identical to the one beside Marcus, hands folded neatly, laptop bag by her feet. Her head turned in slow unison with the truck, and for a moment, as the two cabs were side by side, Marcus saw the same face looking at him from both vehicles. His heart hammered. He must have imagined it. Lights, angles, tired eyes. The blue truck slid ahead and merged back into his lane. Its taillights glowed a steady red in the dark. "Some of them exit," the woman beside him said calmly. "They see me a second time, or a third. They decide something is wrong, that they must have missed their turn. So when I tell them where to go, they listen." He gripped the wheel. "I didn't ask where to go." "Old Ridge Road," she said, as if he hadn't spoken. "You won't see it on that little screen, but it's there. Comes up just before mile 213. If you take it, you won't have to worry about this stretch anymore. It's quiet there. No way stations, no patrol cars, no schedules. A straight shot to where you're really going." His GPS display showed nothing where she mentioned, only a long, unbroken line. "There's nothing there," he said. Her smile was small and patient. "Not for you, yet." The heater, inexplicably, began to blow cooler air. The vents didn't change position, but the subtle warmth faded, replaced by a slow, seeping chill. His breath wasn't visible, but the air carried that thin edge that made his fingers ache just a little. He thought of the sheriff's face, the way the man had looked at him, like someone about to hand a stranger a loaded truth. "People disappear," Marcus said quietly. "Off this road." "Yes." Her tone was almost curious. "Sometimes they drive straight ahead and simply slip out of sight. Sometimes they ease onto the shoulder because they think they see a person standing there. Sometimes they take the exit I give them." "And then what?" he asked. Her eyes didn't change. That was the most unnerving part. No flicker of malice, no cold satisfaction, just calm interest. "I don't know," she said. "I only ride as far as I'm invited." Up ahead, a cluster of faint lights appeared, low and smeared in the distance. An exit, just as the GPS had promised. The green sign emerged slowly into clarity. "Exit 212, Old Ridge Road, 1 mile. Marcus's hands tightened. The GPS map remained stubbornly blank where the exit's icon should have been. It showed the interstate gliding on in a straight line through empty gray space. "You said it wasn't there," she noted, her voice mild. "They must have added it," he said. His own words sounded thin to his ears. In his mirror, the blue truck's taillights drew nearer to the right lane, as if the other driver were preparing to exit. Marcus watched as the truck's right turn signal blinked twice, then not at all, then twice again, out of sync with itself. He blinked. Maybe the bulb was loose. The overhead sign announcing the exit loomed ahead. Old Ridge Road, 1/2 mile. No services. The woman beside him shifted slightly in her seat, as if getting more comfortable. "This is the part where they decide," she said. He could hear, faintly, the hum of her zipper as she adjusted her bag, though she never looked away from the windshield. "What happens if I don't take it?" he asked. "Nothing," she replied. "You keep going. You'll reach Germany Falls. You'll deliver your load. You'll sleep in your cab until the sun hurts your eyes. And one night, on another road, we'll have this same conversation again." The exit ramp began to peel away on the right, a gentle curve of asphalt leading down into a darker patch of trees. The blue truck ahead flicked on its right blinker again. This time, the light stayed on. Its tires eased onto the exit lane, sending up a faint mist of dust where the paved shoulder met the ramp. For a moment, Marcus saw very clearly the passenger in that other cab turn her head toward him. Not a mirror trick now, but a direct, unmistakable look. Her expression was neither warning nor welcome. It was expectation. The wheel vibrated faintly under his hands. His right hand twitched, almost steering toward the ramp of its own accord, driven by some deep animal instinct that said any road away from this stretch must be safer. He thought of the sheriff's steady eyes, the way the clerk had shivered. The way the dashcam had shown empty median where he knew he'd seen someone standing. He kept his left hand clamped on the wheel and lifted his right, just enough to switch on his turn signal. The left one. His rig eased half a foot toward the inside lane, away from the exit. The woman beside him stilled, a subtle tension entering her shoulders. "You'll miss your turn," she said. "This isn't my road," he answered. The ramp slid away to his right. The blue truck's taillights followed it down, shrinking as they descended. For a moment he saw them wink once, like a pair of eyes closing. Then they vanished altogether into the trees. No streetlights marked the end. No reflective signs showed the curve. The exit just ended. The highway ahead was open again, a smooth ribbon stretching into a now slightly lighter horizon. The overhead signs counted down the miles to the next real town. Beside him, the air shifted. He didn't hear a door open. The locks on his panel remained unlit. There was no dramatic gust of wind, no vanishing trick, just a slow easing of pressure, as if something had been leaning against the inside of the cab and gently stood up. "You'll pass through here again," her voice said, now thinner, as if coming from farther away. "Everyone does. There are only so many roads." He kept his gaze forward. "When you do," she added, her tone almost thoughtful, "you might be more tired, or a little more curious, or a little less warned." The cold near his right arm began to dissolve, the temperature in the cab drifting back to normal. "I'll be here," she said softly. Her reflection in the passenger window thinned like mist, then faded entirely, leaving only the dark shape of trees rushing by. Marcus drove on. He didn't look in the passenger seat. He didn't check the dash cam again until he was well past the 214 marker and the first real exit with lights and billboards came into view. Only then, with his rig humming along at a safe speed and other vehicles starting to appear from merging ramps, did he glance down at the little screen. The recording showed only him. Empty seat, empty median. A normal, ordinary stretch of highway, as forgettable as any other. At the truck stop outside Germany Falls, as dawn painted the clouds a washed-out pink, he heard two other drivers talking near the coffee pots. "Guy from our outfit," one was saying. "Ran this way last month. Dispatch hasn't heard from him since Lawson County. State boys found his rig on some little back road. Still idling. Door shut. No one inside." "Bad wreck?" the other driver asked quietly. "No wreck," the first one replied. "No skid marks. No nothing." Marcus stepped past them, poured his coffee, and said nothing. On future runs, whenever his route planner suggested Interstate 71 through Lawson County, he found a way to adjust. A side road here, an alternate highway there. Not out of fear, exactly. Out of respect. He knew that somewhere between mile 203 and 214, on certain nights, a new exit would appear for those willing to see it. And on the median, or the shoulder, or the very edge of his vision, a woman with a laptop bag would be waiting, patient as the road itself. Story number 3. Lena had been driving long enough to know that fatigue didn't sneak up. It crept in steadily, like a slow leak. That night, somewhere in the flat nowhere between Amarillo and the New Mexico line, she could feel that leak widening. Her electronic logbook blinked a quiet warning on the dash. Driving hours nearly exhausted. She needed to park soon, whether she felt ready or not. Outside, the world was a dark, open plain. No towns, no exit lights, only the thin silver line of highway unwinding ahead. Her headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the night, illuminating low scrub, fence posts, and an occasional reflective glance of a cattle guard. She glanced at the GPS. The next marked rest area was still 40 miles away. Her log said she had 30 minutes left before a violation. She grimaced. "Come on," she murmured to the empty cab. "Give me something." Almost as if it heard, the darkness ahead produced a sign, rising slowly into the reach of her beams. "Rest area, Mesa Vista, 2 miles. She frowned. That name rang no bells. The GPS screen showed nothing but open highway. No icon, no marker. She zoomed the map out. Still nothing but a bare line. "Must be new," she said, though the sign itself didn't look new. The green was faded, the reflective paint a little patchy. Could be the satellite maps were out of date. It happened. Her log blinked again. 28 minutes remaining. 2 miles wasn't much. A barely audible sigh escaped her as she made the decision. New or not? Mapped or not? She couldn't argue with the clock. If she tried to push on to the next known stop and got stuck behind construction or an accident, the violation would be on her record. She eased off the throttle slightly and watched for the next sign. Mesa Vista Rest Area, 1 mile, no services. No services usually meant no fuel, no convenience store, just parking, bathrooms, and maybe some vending machines. It wasn't ideal. But ideal didn't matter when the rules were this strict. The exit appeared as a dark notch in the guardrail, then widened into a curving ramp that dropped away from the highway. Wooden posts lined the edge, their tops just visible in her headlights. As she descended, the faint roar of distant highway hum faded. A cluster of sodium lights appeared ahead, casting an amber glow over a low building and 2 wide parking lanes. She rolled in slowly. The rest area was laid out like hundreds of others, a long lot for trucks, another for cars, a small brick building in the center with restrooms and a few vending machines. A handful of picnic tables were scattered under metal shelters. It all looked older, like something built in the 70s and never fully updated. The roof of the building had that long, flat, slightly sagged look. The trash cans were the brown plastic kind with swinging doors, instead of the open-top barrels she saw at newer stops. But the place was clean. The pavement was smooth. The lights buzzed softly but steadily. There were even a few vehicles. 2 other semis were parked nose out along the truck lane. One was an older model cab over, with a faded logo Lena didn't recognize. The other was a boxy white tractor that looked about 10 years behind current designs. A single minivan sat in the car lot, its windows dark. No one moved. Lena selected a spot a few spaces away from the other trucks and backed in, her trailer neatly lining up with the painted stripes. She set the brake and listened as the engine settled into a low idle before she shut it down. The silence that followed felt heavy. No rumble from the other trucks, no distant highway noise. Just the faint high buzz of the overhead lights. And, somewhere far off, a chorus of unseen insects. She checked her mirrors. Nothing but parked vehicles and the low brick building with its pale rectangular windows. Her logbook ticked over to rest break. She had stopped with 8 minutes to spare. She exhaled, unbuckled, and grabbed her small bag. The air outside was warm, but not as sticky as it had been on the highway. The smell of dust and dry grass floated up from the dark fields beyond the low fence. The sky was wide and starless, hidden behind thin, high clouds. She walked toward the building. As she approached, the automatic door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, harsh fluorescent lights bathed everything in a flat, colorless glow. The tile floor was scrubbed but showed spiderweb cracks here and there. The walls were lined with bulletin boards full of pamphlets and faded posters. On one end, an alcove held 3 vending machines, 2 for snacks, 1 for drinks. On the other end, a payphone clung to the wall, its cord coiled neatly, handset resting in the cradle like it had been placed there yesterday. Lena paused. She hadn't seen a working payphone at a rest area in years. A laminated map of the state hung nearby, dotted with tiny symbols for towns and rest stops. She glanced at it, tracing the route with her eyes. Mesa Vista was marked in bold red, easy to spot. How had the GPS missed it? She shrugged inwardly and headed for the restroom. It was empty, quiet except for the soft drone of the ventilation fan. The stalls were clean, the sinks functional, the mirror slightly warped. When she came back out, a man stood by the vending machines. He wore a plaid shirt tucked into worn jeans and a trucker cap with a logo so faded it was just a hint of red. His posture was relaxed, one hand resting on the edge of the snack machine, as if deciding between options. She hadn't heard him come in. "Evening," he said without looking at her. "Hey," Lena replied. She stepped up to the drink machine, trying to shake off the small prickle at the back of her neck. The selection buttons listed brands she knew, but some of the logos were out-of-date packaging from years ago that companies had since redesigned. Still, the prices looked right. She fed in a few bills and pressed for water. The machine hummed, clunked, and delivered a cold bottle with a satisfying thump. "Lucky," the man said. She glanced over. "Excuse me?" "Lucky it works." He gave the snack machine a light tap with his knuckles. "Sometimes they don't. Depends when you catch 'em." He turned his head then, and she saw his face clearly for the first time. He looked to be in his 50s, maybe early 60s, with a weathered, sun-browned complexion and lines etched deeply around his eyes. "Name's Hal," he said, as if they were in a familiar place. "Been here a while." "Lena," she replied, "on my way west. Didn't think there was a rest area out here." "There wasn't," he said mildly. "Then there was. You know how it goes." She frowned slightly. "They build one, you mean?" He studied her for a moment, as if weighing whether she would understand the answer. "You'll be fine," he said instead. "So long as you don't get too comfortable." She gave a short, nervous laugh. "I won't. Just need a few hours. My log's almost maxed." His gaze flicked past her to the bulletin board on the wall. She followed it. One poster caught her eye. A safety campaign with bold red letters, "Buckle up, it's the law." The picture below showed a family smiling stiffly in a station wagon that looked at least 30 years old. The hairstyles, the clothes, they all belonged to another decade. Every pamphlet beneath it had the same yellowed edges. "How long has this place been here?" she asked. Hal didn't answer right away. When she turned back, he was watching her with an expression that wasn't quite pity, but close. "Long enough," he said softly. "You parked already?" "Yeah. Out by the end. Reefer trailer." He nodded. "Don't shut off everything," he said. "Leave something running. Radio, fan, engine, if you have to. Noise helps." "Helps what?" she asked. "Helps you remember there's a road," he said. She waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. Instead, he reached into the snack machine's tray and pulled out a small bag of crackers that she hadn't heard drop. "Catch some rest," he said. "But set an alarm for a little before dawn. Whatever you do, don't sleep past sunrise." Before she could respond, he walked toward the restroom and pushed the door open without looking back. Lena stood alone in the harsh light, the buzz overhead deepening into a faint hum in her ears. She returned to her truck, the night outside feeling thicker now. Under the lot lights, she noticed something she'd missed before. The plates on the older cab overread a state design she didn't recognize at first. When she did, her brow furrowed. The colors and layout were from a version that had been retired years ago. She'd seen old photos of them in trucking magazines. The white tractor's registration sticker on the windshield was the wrong color for the current year. 2 cycles out of date. Maybe they were just slow updating. Maybe. In her cab, she shut the door and locked it with a firm click. The familiar smell of her own space wrapped around her, comforting. She flicked on the sleeper berth light, tossed her bag aside, and sat on the edge of the bunk. Her phone had 1 bar of signal. The time glowed at the top of the screen. 1:13 a.m. She checked her log. It showed her status as "Rest at Mesa Vista Rest Area." Mile marker she didn't recognize. Everything looked normal. She hesitated, then set 2 alarms, one for 4:45 a.m., another at 5, just in case. That would give her a decent chunk of sleep and still have her rolling before sunrise. Hal's warning drifted through her mind, but she tucked it away as superstition. Old-timers had all kinds of superstitions. She left her radio on low, a murmur of distant music filling the cab. Then she lay down, pulled the blanket over herself, and let her eyes close. Sleep came quickly, maybe too quickly. She didn't dream of anything she could remember clearly. Just motion, long and continuous. Like watching the world glide past a window that never changed. She sensed highways stretching in every direction, and yet never arriving anywhere. At some point, a noise pulled at the edge of her consciousness. A faint tapping, like fingers lightly brushing the side of the cab. Half awake, she listened. Tap, tap, tap. Not hurried, not urgent. Just a slow, patient rhythm near the passenger side. Her first thought was wind, a loose strap, some piece of gear shifting. Then she heard a voice. "Hey," it said, muffled through the door. "Everything okay in there?" It was a man's voice, not Hal's. Younger, polite. She forced one eye open and looked toward the cab curtains. Dim light filtered around their edges. Her radio still played, but the song had jumped to something she didn't recognize. The melody wavered. "Ma'am?" the voice tried again. "Just checking on you. You've been here a while." Her phone lay by her pillow. She groped for it and squinted at the screen. 1:13 a.m. She blinked. The same time as before. The alarm icons were gone. The tapping came again, a little more insistent. She slid off the bunk, heart beating harder than the situation seemed to warrant. Without opening the curtains, she peered at the small display from her dash cam. which had a rear-facing view set to cycle through cameras. The lot looked exactly as it had when she'd parked. Same positions, same angles. No person at her door. No movement at all. "Ma'am?" The voice sounded closer now, as if right beside the window. "You really should get some rest. Just close your eyes. Morning will come." Every instinct in her screamed that morning would not come. Not here. She reached up and flicked on the cab light. The sudden brightness made her flinch. The tapping stopped. For a few seconds, all was silent, except for the low murmur of the radio and the faint hum of the lot lights outside. Then softly from just beyond the glass, "You're making it harder than it has to be." Her breath came shallow. She didn't answer. Instead, she hit the ignition. The engine turned over on the first try, the vibrations filling the cab like a lifeline. The faint chill that had crept into the air seemed to retreat. She shifted in her seat, pulling back one corner of the curtain just enough to see. The lot outside was still beneath the yellow lights. The older cab over. The white tractor. The lone minivan. The brick building's windows glowed a steady, empty, white. No one stood by her door. No one walked between the vehicles. She stared for a long moment, then checked her phone again. 1:13 a.m. Her stomach tightened. She switched the phone off and on. The time jumped briefly to 1:45, then flicked back to 1:13. No signal bars now. Just a small, hollow, no service, at the top. On the dashboard, her electronic log showed the same time, frozen. A memory surfaced unbidden. Hal's voice saying, "Don't sleep past sunrise," as if sunrise here wasn't tied to the sky at all. She snapped the curtain fully open, sat in the driver's seat, and dropped the truck into gear. The rest break wasn't complete. The system would flag it. She didn't care. Slowly, carefully, she pulled out of the slot, her headlights sweeping across the lot. As they passed over the older cab over, she saw someone sitting in the driver's seat. A man, head tilted slightly to the side, hands resting on the wheel. His eyes were open, watching her pass. His face had the set, patient look of someone who had been waiting for a long time. Light flashed over his license plate. The state design was one she knew had been retired more than a decade earlier. Her headlights moved on. At the end of the truck lane, the exit ramp curved back up toward the highway. A blue sign read, "Interstate 40, east divided by west." Beneath it, in smaller letters, "Mesa Vista Rest Area. Next, right." She frowned. That was the sign she should have seen on the highway before exiting, not from within the rest area itself. As she approached the ramp, the tapping started again. Not on the door this time, but somewhere deeper, like fingers drumming on the frame of the truck itself. "You don't have to go," the same young man's voice said, very close now. "You're tired. You know you are. This is what this place is for." Her hands tightened on the wheel. She thought of Hal saying, "Leave something running. Noise helps you remember there's a road." She pressed the accelerator. For a moment, the truck felt heavy, as if pushing through thick mud. The exit ramp didn't seem to get closer. The sign hung at a fixed distance, glowing mockingly. "Just close your eyes for a little bit," the voice coaxed. "You're not breaking any rules here. Time doesn't really matter." The dash lights flickered. The radio hissed and jumped backward to the same song it had been playing when she first lay down. The chorus repeated, then repeated again, as if caught. She stared at the ramp, at the strip of night beyond it where she knew the highway should be. "Road's out there," she whispered to herself. "It was here before this place. It'll be here after." Her truck crept forward. Inch by inch, the sign finally began to move, sliding past in her peripheral vision. The sensation of mud lightened. The tapping grew frantic for a moment, then faded. At the top of the ramp, the highway appeared two dark lanes stretching left and right, reflective, markers winking like eyes. Her headlights caught the green mile marker just beyond the merge. Mile 238. The number meant nothing to her, but the sight of a familiar, ordinary marker was almost enough to make her knees weak. She merged back onto the interstate, hands steady on the wheel. In her side mirror, the exit ramp dropped away into darkness. The sodium lights of Mesa Vista glowed faintly for a few seconds, then disappeared behind a low rise. Her phone buzzed in her cup holder. She glanced down. Signal bars had returned. The time read 3:02 a.m. Her alarms, which should have already gone off, now triggered one after another, vibrating angrily as if trying to catch up. She silenced them and checked her log. It recorded that she had taken a full, continuous rest break from 12:45 a.m. to 3 a.m. at location unavailable. No mention of Mesa Vista. A few hours later, at a busy truck stop near Gallup, she sat at the counter with a mug of coffee and mentioned the Mesa Vista rest area to another driver, an older woman with gray streaks in her braid. "Out that way?" the woman said, stirring her drink. "There used to be one by that name. Closed it down in what? 97? 98? Gas leak or something? Awful deal. Folks went to sleep and just didn't wake up. Whole family in one car. Couple drivers in their cabs. They tore the place out after that. Nothing there now but a turnaround and some concrete pads." Lena felt a slow chill move through her. "You sure?" she asked quietly. "Because I stopped there last night." The woman's eyes searched her face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there made her expression soften. "Then you didn't stop," she said gently. "Not really. You passed through." On future runs, when her route took her along that lonely stretch, Lena watched the signs carefully. Sometimes there was nothing between mile markers but empty fence lines and wind. Sometimes in the distance, she thought she saw a faint, low glow where no town should be, like sodium lights humming over an invisible lot. She never took the exit to check. And on the nights when her logbook flashed and her eyes burned and every mile felt like a weight, she remembered a man in a worn cap saying, "You'll be fine, so long as you don't get too comfortable," and a rest area that waited patiently in the dark for those too tired to question why time there never seemed to move quite right. Story number 4. Cal didn't believe in much beyond fuel gauges and logbooks. After 30 years on the road, he trusted what he could measure and what he could hear with his own ears. Stories about haunted highways and cursed mile markers were something to pass the time at diners, nothing more. Still, he kept his CB on. On quiet nights, the crackling chatter on Channel 19 was like company. Voices drifted in and out, drivers swapping road conditions, jokes, and the occasional lonely confession. Static filled the gaps, a familiar blanket of noise that made the cab feel less like a metal box moving through an empty world. That night, somewhere between Lincoln and a small Missouri town that barely showed up on the map, the sky was clear and the air sharp. The long, flat stretch of Highway 29 lay quiet under a thin crescent moon. His trailer hummed along behind him, loaded with dry goods bound for a supermarket warehouse. It was just after 2 a.m. The kind of hour when most rest areas were half full of sleeping trucks, and the last of the evening traffic had thinned to nothing. Cal adjusted in his seat and glanced at the green glow of his dash clock. Ardian Shisenfen. He'd been making good time. The weather report had promised light winds and no storms. The only thing he had to watch out for was a patch of construction 10 miles past the Coldwater River Bridge. He took a sip of lukewarm coffee and reached for the CB mic, more out of habit than need. "Northbound 29, mile 112, he said. "Road's clear, moon's out, and the coffee's bad. Y'all behave out there." Normally, someone would answer with a wisecrack. Tonight, the channel answered only with a low hiss. He let the mic fall back to its clip. Static filled the cab, soft and even. Then, through the static, another sound rose. At first, he thought it was just a burst of interference, a faint warble in the white noise. But it grew clearer, resolving into a murmur of voices layered over one another. "Checking in, this is Redbird, westbound. P, we here, copy. I'm behind you, still can't see a thing. Breaker 1 to 9. Anybody got eyes on that Coldwater sign?" The hair on Cal's arm stirred. The voices sounded like they were coming through a long metal tunnel hollow, echoing slightly, as if distant but close at the same time. He leaned forward and adjusted the volume. The sound sharpened. "Ice piling up on my mirrors, boys. I don't like this. Got whiteout conditions. Repeat, whiteout. Truck ahead of me's just gone dark." Cal checked his windshield. Moonlight glinted off the glass. No snow, no fog. The road stretched clean and dry ahead. He flicked to another channel, listened to a burst of squeals and a bored dispatcher, then flipped back to 19. The strange conversation was still there. "Midland Convoy roll call," a steady male voice said, a hint of authority in the tone. "Redbird? Here. Pee-wee? Still here. Harlan? Yeah. Daisy chain? Present. Cold water. Silence. The hairs at the back of Cal's neck stood up. He grabbed the mic. Breaker 1 to 9, he said. You boys running some kind of simulation out there? I'm on 29, skies are clear. What storm you talking about? The channel went dead. Static hissed, soft and uninterrupted. He waited, lips pressed together. Maybe it had been some recorded clip, a joke someone was playing. He'd heard prankers patch old transmissions into the CB before, but something about the tired strain in those voices felt too real. He was about to hang the mic back up when the steady male voice returned, sharper now, like it was speaking directly into his own cab. Who's that on my channel? It asked. Name's Cal, he replied slowly. Handles Railman. Just rolling north. I didn't mean to cut in. Thought I heard trouble. Railman, the voice repeated thoughtfully. You anywhere near Coldwater, Railman? Cal glanced at the upcoming mile marker. Ibayisher. Coldwater River Bridge was at 127. 17 miles ahead. Not yet, he said. Heading that way. Pause. Road clear? The voice asked. Clear as it gets, Cal answered. Dry. No ice. No snow. Barely a breeze. You all pulling my leg or what? Soft murmurs leaked through the static. Another voice, higher and nervous, muttered. Told you he'd answer. Always does, one way or another. Quiet, Pee-wee, the first man snapped, then returned to Cal. Railman, humor me. What's your clock say? Cal looked. Ardian Shasanfen. He frowned. Same as it did 10 minutes ago, he said. Might be slow. Why? Because our clocks stopped at 2:13, the man said calmly. Every one of them. The words slid into the cab like a draft. Where are you? Cal asked. Westbound, mile 127, the man replied. Or we were. Road went from wet to glass in half a mile. Snow so thick we couldn't see the reflectors. We kept moving because we thought if we stopped, the guy behind us would rear-end us. Guess none of it mattered. Something creaked in Cal's seat as he shifted his weight. That bridge? He asked quietly. Coldwater? Yeah, the man said. Coldwater. That old iron skeleton with the bad joints. They tell folks to slow down for it when it ices, but nobody ever slows enough. Cal could picture it. He'd crossed that bridge dozens of times. Narrow lanes, low metal trusses, a black river slipping silently beneath. In winter, signs warned about black ice. In storms, the whole span shuddered slightly from crosswinds. But it's not winter, Cal said, more to himself than them. It's September. Weather doesn't matter much to us anymore, the man replied. Time doesn't either. But it matters to you. The way he said you made the cab feel smaller. You boys running some kind of ghost story channel? Cal said, forcing a chuckle. Because if you're trying to spook me before a bridge, you picked the wrong driver. You think we're a story, the man answered without offense. Most do. Some keep driving, some listen. The CB crackled. A different voice, one Cal hadn't heard yet, broke in rough and urgent. Railman, you see any ground fog ahead yet? Any low mist rolling over the asphalt? Cal opened his mouth to say no, then saw something pale along the edges of his headlights. At first he thought it was just a trick of the moonlight, but as he rolled onward, he saw the faint blur along the ditches slowly thickening, trailing wisps onto the road. His hand tightened on the wheel. Little fog, he conceded. Nothing serious. Give it 5 miles, the urgent voice said. It'll get serious. You're telling me you can see my weather? Cal asked. We remember it, the first man said. We remember the way it builds. Every time. Cal swallowed. You all call yourselves Midland Convoy? He asked, testing a name he'd heard only once in the static. A pause. That's right, the man said quietly. Out of the Midland Yard. We ran together that night. Dispatch pushed us to make miles before the worst of the storm hit. Worst of it caught us on the bridge instead. Cal had heard of that pileup, not the stories told in whispers, but the official report. Years ago, a chain reaction on Coldwater River Bridge. In a blizzard. Trucks and cars stacked up. People trapped for hours. No clear number on how many didn't walk away. He had never connected it with a name. Just headlines and a detour. How am I hearing you? He asked. Radio's a funny thing, the man said. Some nights the air gets thin. Voices travel farther than they should. Sometimes they slip other ways too. The fog ahead thickened into a low crawling blanket. It hugged the ground, spilling onto the asphalt like slow smoke. Cal dropped his speed a few miles per hour and flipped on his fog lights. "Railman." The urgent voice cut in again. "Couple miles before the bridge, you're gonna see a little four-door, sitting on the shoulder. Hazard lights blinking. Looks like it's still got some heat in it. You'll want to move over and give it room. Don't." Cale's jaw tightened. "Someone's broke down, I'm not just gonna blow by," he said. "You will if you've got sense," the man said. "Guy in that car's already gone. Slid there 30 minutes before we reached him. Same as you're gonna." We all tried to line up polite and ease past. That's what stacked us. There's no shoulder. Not a real one. You pull left to give him room, you're riding the ice crown. Takes one nudge from behind to set it all off. The picture formed in Cal's mind too easily. One cautious move, one tiny slide, a line of heavy rigs with nowhere to go. "How do you know I'm gonna see that car?" he asked. "We've talked to you before," the man said, as though stating something obvious. "Sometimes you answer, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you hear us and think it's your own thoughts. We're trying to make it the time you listen." Silence pressed into the cab. The fog now covered the whole road, a soft white tunnel that swallowed his beams. The clear September night had turned swampy and cold. Fine moisture beaded on the glass. Cal checked the thermometer on his dash. The outside temperature had dropped from 68 to 36 in the last few minutes. His gut knotted. "Cold water's still open, right?" he asked. "Tonight it is," the man said. "In our night, they closed it after us." In the glow of his headlights, the next green sign appeared, its letters blurred by moisture. Coldwater River. 3 miles. Cal eased off the cruise control and rested his foot on the pedal, ready to brake gently. He flipped on his engine brake to the lowest setting. "Redbird," the roll call man said in the background, his voice snapping into command. "You still up front?" "Yeah," a woman's voice answered, steely but tired. "I'm here. You talk him through the curves," he told her. We. You keep an eye on that four-door. If he twitches, you holler." Cal almost laughed at the absurdity. Here he was, guided toward a real bridge in a real fog by a convoy that might have crashed decades ago. But he didn't change the channel. The first hint of taillights glowed ahead, 2 steady red dots hovering in the white. Another truck, moving cautiously. "You're catching up to us," Redbird said. Her voice was softer than the others, but firm. "We're about where you are. Our snow's thicker, but the air feels the same. You got your marker lights on?" "Yeah," Cal said. "Then we see you," she replied. "Far back, like a memory. We're gonna try something different with you." "You're not exactly making this less creepy," Cal muttered. "Creepy's better than crushed," Pee Wee put in. "Eyes open, Railman. That car's coming up on your right." Through the murk, Cal saw it. A small sedan sitting half on, half off the narrow shoulder. Its hazard lights blinking a dull orange. No motion inside. No figure, waving for help. He moved his hands firmly on the wheel and stayed centered in his lane. "Incoming," Pee Wee said, voice tight. "That's where Harlan eased left. That's where Daisy tapped him. That's where—" "Hush," Redbird cut in. "Railman, hold your line. Don't look at the car. Look at the next reflector. Then the next." Cal fixed his eyes on the faint white posts along the road's edge, each one appearing like a ghost and falling behind. He passed the sedan so close he could have reached out and touched its side if the door had been open. The blink of its lights strobed his cab for a second. The truck ahead of him slowed more. He matched it. The fog thickened further, swallowing shape and distance. Metal loomed out of the white, a dark arch overhead. The front edge of the truss. Coldwater Bridge. "Easy," Redbird murmured. "It'll feel like you're floating. Don't let it trick you. Stay straight." The bridge's narrow lanes pressed in. The guardrails felt too close. Moisture froze in delicate lace along the side mirrors. Halfway across, the world seemed to vanish. There was no river below, no structure around him. Just white. "He's drifting," Pee Wee said sharply. "Nose is sliding a hair left." Cal felt it then, a subtle, treacherous pull under his tires. The crown of the bridge had turned slick. He countersteered the smallest fraction, heart pounding. In the static, a chorus of voices rose, overlapping Redbird's, Pee Wee's, others unnamed. They weren't words now, just a collective breath held on his behalf. The truck ahead ghosted in and out of the fog, its taillights smearing red streaks across his vision. For a second, they flickered, vanished entirely, his chest sized. Then they snapped back, exactly where they had been, moving steadily. "You still with us, Railman?" The roll call voice asked, softer than before. He swallowed. "Yeah," he said. "Still here." "Then you're about to see something we never saw," Redbird said. "Daylight on the other side." The end of the bridge appeared as a darker patch in the white, a slight downward slope. The edges of trees materialized, then solidified. The fog thinned as quickly as it had grown. The moon reappeared, pale over the fields. The outside temperature climbed back toward the 50s. Cal exhaled a long breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Behind him, the radio crackled. "Midland Convoy roll call," the steady voice said, quieter this time. "Redbird? Here. Pee-wee? Still here. Harlan? A beat. Yeah. Daisy Chain? Here." The voices paused. Then, "Railman?" Cal's fingers tightened around the mic. He didn't answer. In the silence, the man spoke for him. "Here. For now." Static washed over the words, soft and final. "Keep that bridge in your mirrors, Railman," Redbird's voice said faintly. "Don't look back at it for too long. It looks back." The signal thinned, breaking into fragments. "See you again. Different weather. Same river. Maybe next time you talk first." Then only the familiar hiss of Channel 19 remained. At the next truck stop, Cal parked under the bright canopy and went inside for coffee he knew he wouldn't taste. A couple of drivers sat at a table by the window, flipping through an old photo someone had left pinned to the bulletin board. "Look at this," one said, tapping the picture. "Midland Convoy, they called him. Taken the week before that Coldwater mess. My uncle used to talk about him. Said they ran so tight they might as well have been chained together." Cal drifted closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. The photo showed a line of trucks angled in front of a low brick dispatch building. Snow clung to their bumpers. A white banner over the bay doors read, "Midland Yard." Near the center of the line, one rig's cab stood out dark blue with a silver stripe. The company logo on the door matched the one on Cal's own truck, just in an older font. Someone had scrawled names on the photo's border in blue ink. Redbird. Pee-wee. Harlan. Daisy. At the far edge of the frame, half cut off, another name was written, a little fainter, as if added later. The ink not quite matching. Railman. Cal stared until the letters blurred. Outside, trucks rolled in and out beneath the sodium lights. Their engines, a low, steady rumble. From then on, whenever his route took him over the Coldwater River, he checked the weather twice and never took the bridge at speed, no matter how clear the sky looked. Some nights, on channels filled with nothing but static, he thought he heard faint roll calls slipping through, names spoken into a world that had moved on without them. He never answered when they called his handle, but he left his radio on. Story number 5. Raina preferred daylight runs. She liked seeing the fields roll by, the tankers and reefers gliding along beside her, the clear, no-nonsense feel of the highway when the sun was up. Nights made her feel like the world narrowed to just her headlights, and whatever might be hiding at the very edge of them. But dispatch didn't care what she preferred, and the load in her trailer had needed dropping in Kansas City by midnight. By the time she was empty and headed back east to catch a morning pickup, the sky was black and the interstate had thinned to a quiet ribbon of asphalt. Her trailer bounced light behind her now deadhead, no cargo. The fuel gauge was solid, the logbook showed plenty of hours left, and the weather was cool and calm. Somewhere out there, other drivers were crashing in sleeper berths or staring at TVs in truck stop lounges. Raina hummed along to a song on low volume and kept her eyes on the faint green signs flickering past. State Highway 44. East, the GPS read. Next service area, 50. 2 miles. She exhaled through her teeth. 52, she muttered. Could have at least put a bathroom somewhere in between. As if answering, a pattern of orange flashing lights appeared far ahead, low to the ground on the right. A sign rose from the dark, letters popping into clarity as she drew closer. Way and Safety Inspection Station, 2 miles. All commercial vehicles must enter, when flashing. The yellow lights above the sign blinked steadily. She frowned. She didn't remember a way station along this stretch. She ran it at least once a month. Her GPS showed nothing ahead but open road. She zoomed the map out. Bare highway, no icon, no marker. New build? She wondered aloud. States threw up new scales all the time. Sometimes the satellite maps lagged behind. She checked her mirrors. No one behind her but a set of distant headlights that might have belonged to a pickup. Up ahead, the amber beacons of the station pulsed in time with her heartbeat, just enough to dig under her skin. Another sign appeared. Truck inspection. 1 mile. All trucks. The smaller line at the bottom caught her eye more than the rest. Failure to stop. Min. Fine. $750. Raina had no interest in gifting the state that kind of money. She eased off the cruise control and settled into manual, preparing to take the ramp. You're empty, she told herself. They'll wave you through. In and out. No big deal. The turnoff came up on the right. A wide, gently curved ramp dropping down from the interstate. New concrete barriers lined it, their sides bright and unscarred. Sodium lights bathed the road in a muted orange glow, washing out the stars. As she descended, the main highway sounds faded, replaced by an odd hush. At the bottom, the station opened up in front of her. It was big, bigger than most she'd seen. 2 long-scale lanes stretched toward a low, glass-fronted building with a flat roof. Over each lane, electronic signs glowed a watchful red. Closed. Only the far right lane showed green. Open. Enter. Beyond the scales, a sprawling lot spread out, striped for rows and rows of parking. It was surprisingly full. Shadows of parked rigs stood in neat lines, their trailers blocking most of the building from view. Raina rolled across the entry line. A camera on a tall pole swiveled to follow her, its red indicator light blinking once. She eased onto the right-hand lane, lining her steer tires up with the faded guidance paint. The overhead sign flicked from open, enter, to slow, roll. A voice crackled over a speaker near the lane. Truck in lane 3, it said. Come to a complete stop on the scale, please. The tone was flat, unhurried. Mail, somewhere between 30 and 50. Raina brought her truck to a gentle stop. The suspension sighed. For a second, everything was still. Then the weightboard ahead of her blinked to life. She watched as the numbers rolled up. Gross. 118,460 pounds. Drive. 34,220 pounds. Steer. 14,010 pounds. Trailer. 70,230 pounds. Raina stared. I'm empty, she said aloud. The absurdity of it punched a short, incredulous laugh out of her. There was not a thing in her trailer, but a couple of straps and some dust. The speaker crackled. Truck in lane 3, the same voice said. You are overweight. Proceed to the right shoulder and pull around back for further inspection. Hold on, Raina said, leaning toward the open window. That scale's wrong. I dropped my load 20 miles back. Trailer's empty. Step 1 is declaration, the voice replied calmly. The system shows you overweight. All undeclared loads must be inspected. Proceed to the right shoulder, please. Even through the tinny speaker, the man's words were clear. He hadn't asked her what she was hauling. He had simply said, undeclared loads. Raina shifted in her seat, unsettled. Look, she said, forcing patience. I'm not arguing to argue. You've got bad numbers. My gauges are showing barely anything on the tandems. I can swing by the CAT scale down the road and send you the ticket if you want. Silence. The weightboard's digits flickered, then steadied again on the impossible number. Gross. 118,460 pounds. The intercom popped softly. Raina Harper, the voice said. Proceed to secondary inspection. She went cold. I didn't tell you my name, she said. Proceed to secondary inspection, the voice repeated, unbothered. Follow the right lane around the back of the building. Park where directed. Do not shut off your engine. Every practical instinct she had told her to throw the truck in gear, roll off the scale, and deal with the ticket later if she had to. But something else, older and deeper, made her pause. The highway above was a dark line, faint through the gap in the trees. Up there, life went on as normal. Down here, beneath the flashing amber lights, the air felt contained, like a bowl turned over a patch of road. Her CB hissed gently in the background. She reached for the mic. "Anyone else just run through a scale at mile 221? She asked. "Got a station here saying I'm loaded when I'm not. Y'all seeing the same thing?" For a few heartbeats, nothing answered but static. Then, faintly, another driver's voice came through, threadbare and washed in distance. "Scale at 221's been closed for years, sister," it said. "You sure you're where you think you are?" The line crackled and dropped. Her radio slid back into smooth, empty noise. Raina swallowed. The intercom popped again. "Truck in lane 3, you are blocking the scale," the man said. A note of impatience slid very gently into his words. "There are others waiting. Proceed now." She looked at her mirrors. The entrance lane behind her was empty. No headlights, no idling motors, just the gentle slope up toward the highway and the soft glow of the sign. All trucks must enter when flashing. Her hands moved almost before she decided to let them. She took the truck out of gear, released the brakes, and rolled off the platform. The weightboard blinked once, then went dark. To the right, a narrow drive curved between the back of the station building and a line of parked trailers. A sign on a stand read, "Secondary inspection. Follow arrows." The reflective arrow pointed into the shadows. Raina followed. The drive opened into the larger lot. Overhead lights hummed on tall poles, casting cones of yellow over the rows of trucks. Up close, she could see that many of them were older models. Square-nosed cabs, faded paint schemes from companies she hadn't seen on the road in years, some that she knew had been bought out or gone under. She passed a cab over with a sun-bleached logo she recognized from childhood photos, her father standing beside a truck just like it. Its windshield was dusty on the inside, a fine gray film. "Keep going," the voice in the speaker instructed. "Row C, spot 5. Row C." Painted letters on the cracked asphalt guided her. A, B, C. She nosed between two rigs and found the 5th space marked with a crooked white 5. "Pull in and set brakes," the voice said. "Remain in your vehicle until contacted." The slot was tight, but she slid in with practiced ease. On the left, a tanker sat with its hazard placards turned to gray, the numbers worn away. On the right, a dry van's reflective tape glowed softly. Its license plate was the old design her state had used at least a decade ago. She set the brakes. The engine idled with a familiar, steady thrum. Nothing happened. No inspector walked out. No flashlight bobbed toward her cab. The building's back door, a metal slab with a narrow window, stayed shut. Raina checked the clock. Ardan Sishayifen. Her logbook screen blinked. On duty. Inspection. She drummed her fingertips on the wheel. The dashboard lights seemed a little dimmer than usual, their green glow edging toward yellow. "Secondary, huh?" she muttered. "This some kind of joke?" Her phone vibrated in the cup holder. She picked it up. No service. The earlier radio voice echoed in her head. "Scale's been closed for years." She flicked on the dome light and reached for her permit binder, thumbing through the papers. All current, all in order. Her inspection history showed one minor log violation 2 years back, clear since. A folded sheet of paper slid loose from the back pocket and fell into her lap. She hadn't put anything back there recently. She unfolded it. State.incident report, Cold Creek Inspection Station, 2015. Her breath caught. She knew that name. Cold Creek was on a different highway, one she didn't run anymore. Back then, she'd been new, running hard, late for a delivery. There had been an inspection station, lights on, sign flashing all trucks enter. She'd rolled past. Dispatch had been in her ear about the schedule. The station had been notorious for long backups. She'd made a choice, told herself she'd catch the next legal exit and double back if she had to. She hadn't. 15 minutes later, on a curved stretch in the rain, a pileup had occurred behind her. An overweight flatbed that might have been turned around at the station lost control, shoved a small car into the guardrail. She'd never seen it happen. She only heard about it after, in fragments and hushed conversations. Legally, she'd been in the clear. She wasn't involved, wasn't on camera. But the knowledge that she'd blown past the checkpoint that might have caught the weight rode with her ever since. Like an invisible pallet in the back of her mind, she stared at the incident report in her lap. Her name wasn't on it. But in the notes section, a line had been underlined. Multiple drivers reported white Freightliner day cab failed to enter station prior to collision. Beneath it, someone had circled the line with a red pen and written a time, 2:13 a.m., the exact time on her dash when the scale had called her by name. Her heart thudded. The speaker by her mirror crackled. "Raina Harper," the voice said, gentler now. "You bypassed Cold Creek Inspection Station on April 3rd, 2015. One undeclared overweight unit proceeded onto a wet grade. One four-door sedan did not reach its destination. Do you acknowledge this?" She gripped the wheel. "You reading my thoughts now?" she said hoarsely. "That report doesn't list me. I wasn't there." "You were there," the voice said. "You chose the lane that did not slow. You chose the mile where you did not stop. We do not assign fault. We measure load." The weight board from the front of the station wasn't visible from where she Saturday. Still, she felt it somehow, as if its numbers hung above the cab. "Offloading is available," the voice said. "Step inside with your documentation. Declare what you are carrying. You may proceed lighter." She looked down at the paper in her hands. The edges had smudges of ink that matched her own fingers, as if she'd held it many times. Outside, the lot was unnervingly still. The other trucks did not idle. Their cabs were dark, their windows opaque. Yet she felt watched, as though something behind every windshield was waiting to see what she would do. Her door handle felt colder than it should when she wrapped her hand around it. She opened the door and climbed down, boots hitting the pavement with a dull thud. The air back here was different than at the highway level. Thicker. Sound dampened strangely. Her own footsteps seemed more muted than they should. She walked toward the back door of the station. The metal surface was scratched around the handle, like hands had pushed it open countless times. A small sign read, "Inspection Office. Hours. Open when needed." She pushed the door. It swung inward on squeaking hinges. Inside, a narrow hallway led to a glass window with a counter beneath it. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh white glow on beige walls. Metal chairs lined one side, their plastic seats scuffed and old-fashioned. A bulletin board held safety posters dated years ago: "Wear your seatbelt, maintain your brakes, check your logs." A calendar on the wall behind the glass showed April 2015. The days were marked off up to the second with a red pen. The third was blank. No one stood behind the window. The office beyond was a blur of file cabinets and shadow. A little brass bell sat on the counter. Raina reached out and tapped it. It made no sound. The intercom grill above the glass buzzed. "Documentation," the voice said. It sounded closer now, though she still saw no one. "Place undeclared load on the counter." Raina looked down. The incident report lay in her hand. She swore she'd left it in the cab, but here it was, edges folded from being gripped too tightly. With a slow, deliberate motion, she laid the paper on the counter. Behind the glass, a digital display on the wall flickered. Gross, 118,460 pounds. As she lifted her hand from the report, the numbers began to drop. 11,200, 9,400, 76,000. Her chest felt tight, like the air in the room had grown heavier. A strange sense of lightness spread through her limbs, as if a weight she hadn't known she was carrying was being loosened, fiber by fiber. She watched the numbers fall. 60,000. 54,000. "How much do you want?" she asked, voice low. "All loads must be declared," the voice replied gently. "You cannot proceed overloaded. You may leave what you brought here. We will hold it. The road ahead will be easier." The numbers hit 42,000 and slowed. 40,000. 39,800. Somewhere in the building, something ticked, like a cooling engine. Images she had kept shoved in the far back of her mind flickered at the edges of her thoughts. Headlights smeared by rain, a glimpse of flashing signs. The cold knowledge that she could have lifted her foot that night and hadn't. She imagined that unseen display above the scale outside, tracking not steel and rubber but something else. Her fingertips tingled. If she walked away now, left the report on the counter, what would be left of her guilt? of the thin wire of responsibility that had kept her extra careful all these years. Would she feel nothing at all when she crossed future stations, when she saw cars on wet curves? The idea was tempting, too tempting. Her hand moved almost without her willing it. She picked up the report. The numbers on the display jumped. 58,000, 74,000, 11,860. The air seemed to press in around her for a second, like a held breath. You choose to remain loaded, the voice said. No anger, no disappointment, just statement. I choose to carry what's mine, she managed. All of it. I'll do that on the road, not in here. Silence hummed in the lights. Then you may proceed, the voice said at last. You have declared. The station records your weight. You are free to move on. She backed away from the counter, still holding the paper. The hallway felt longer this time as she walked out. The door resisted a little when she pushed it, then gave way with the same squeak. Outside, the air hit her like a clean gust. The lot looked different. Many of the trucks she had seen before were gone. The rows were patchier. Grass pushed up through cracks in the pavement. One of the overhead lights flickered on and off, its bulb near the end of its life. She hurried back to her rig, climbed in, and shut the door. Her heart hammered in her ears. Clock, read Dryzex A.M. The logbook showed, inspection, 7 minutes. She hadn't been in the building for only 7 minutes. It had felt longer, much longer. The paper in her hand crinkled unnaturally. When she looked down, it wasn't the incident report anymore. It was a blank sheet, creased and worn, with a faint outline where the text had been, as if it had been left in the sun too long. She folded it and shoved it into the glove box. As she pulled out of the space, she glanced at the inspection building in her mirror. In the hazy glow of the remaining lights, she could see a row of silhouettes behind the glass, vague as reflections. Figures standing shoulder to shoulder, watching the lot. They did not move, did not raise hands or gesture. They simply stood, as if keeping count. By the time she rolled past the front of the station, the weightboard was dark. The lane signs above the scales all read, closed. The amber warning lights above the highway sign had stopped flashing. At the top of the ramp, she merged back onto the interstate. A green sign glided by on her right. Way station, 1/4 mile, closed. She looked. On the shoulder, down a sloping access road, an old inspection station sat in shadow. Its roof sagged. The windows were boarded over. Weeds choked the entrance lane. A rusted sign leaned against a fence. Cold Creek Inspection, permanently closed. At the next truck stop, as dawn started to gray the edge of the sky, she sat at a table with a cup of weak coffee and asked another driver about it. Cold Creek? The woman said, stirring sugar into her mug. Yeah, they shut that place for good after a bad wreck back in 15. Folks say the scales never read right after that. Whole yard's dead now. Nothing down there but stray dogs and old cones. Raina wrapped her hands around her cup, feeling the gentle heat. Ever get called into a way station that wasn't on your GPS? She asked quietly. The woman gave her a long look. Sometimes, she said. Places show up when you're carrying more than you admit. I don't worry much about the open ones. She tipped her chin toward the window, where the highway ran past in a steady stream of metal and light. It's the closed stations, she added softly, that don't like to be forgotten. From then on, when Raina rolled past old, shuttered inspection yards, those little ghost towns of cracked pavement and silent booths, she kept her speed steady and her eyes forward. If a sign ever flashed at her from an exit that wasn't on the map, she knew she'd have a choice. Declare what she carried, or keep hauling it until the road itself asked her to stop. Story number 6. Andre had wanted his own truck for as long as he'd been driving. Company rigs paid the bills, but they were never really his. He took whatever tractor they assigned, lived in it for weeks, then handed it back for the next driver to scuff up. So when he finally signed the papers on a used white Freightliner from a bankruptcy auction, it felt like crossing a line. The paint was dull in places, the dashboard plastic faded, but the engine was strong and the price had been right. It was his now, his name on the title, his bed in the sleeper, his worn steering wheel under his hands. The auction yard man had slapped the side of the cab with a flat palm when they handed over the keys. Solid truck, he'd said. Previous owner put a lot of miles on it. Kept it up. Weird fella, though. Lot of notes in the cab. You can toss him if you want. Andre had just laughed and nodded. Truckers left all kinds of junk behind when they turned in a unit. Maps, pens, faded, photos, cheap sunglasses. He expected the same. It wasn't until his first night run in the truck that he found the notebook. He'd picked up a load of electronics outside Chicago, bound for a warehouse near Denver. Dispatch had routed him along a long, fairly empty toll road that cut across the plains. Good pavement, sparse of traffic, few big hills. A perfect shakedown run for a new-to-him rig. By the time the sun slid down behind a thin gray bank of clouds, he was already hours out, the city lights left behind. The world around him flattened into dark fields and silhouetted trees. His dashboard glowed a cool green. The radio murmured some late-night talk show more for company than content. At a rest area, just past 8, he pulled in to check his straps and grab coffee. As he reached into the glove box for his flashlight, his hand brushed spiral wire. The notebook was thick, dog-eared, its cardboard cover smudged with fingerprints and engine grime. On the front, in heavy block letters, someone had written, "For whoever gets this truck next. Read before night driving." He snorted under his breath, but curiosity hooked him. He flipped it open. The first page was simple. "If you're reading this, you bought my truck. Congratulations. She's good to you if you're good to her." Second thing, if you run nights on the I-70 plains between mile 180 and 260, you're going to see some things you can't explain. You can pretend you didn't, or you can follow a few rules I learned the hard way. Andre glanced at the page, then at the darkness beyond the rest area lights. He checked his GPS. Current highway, 70 watts. Next exit, 180, 8 miles. He read on. Rule 1. At mile 183, you'll pass an old billboard with no advertisement on it, just black plywood. Do not look in your passenger mirror as you go by. Keep your eyes on the road. If you look, you'll start seeing things behind you that aren't there. Rule 2. At mile 197, if your radio goes to static, do not try to change the station. Do not turn it off. Let it play. If you switch, you might hear your own voice. Don't want that. Rule 3. At mile 204, you'll feel like you hit a bump you didn't see. That's okay. Don't stop to check. There's nothing under your tires you can help. Rule 4. If your phone rings between 2:21 and 2:24 a.m., no matter what, do not answer it. The handwriting was firm, all caps. No little doodles, no extra commentary, just statement after statement. Andre flipped through a few pages. More rules, each with a mile marker or landmark. A lone cottonwood tree, a broken-down service station, a certain exit with a rusted green sign. It read like a list of superstitions crossed with threat assessments. He shook his head, put the notebook back in the glove box, and stepped out to walk around his truck. The air was cool and dry. Crickets chirped somewhere beyond the concrete. Other rigs idled in their slots. Faint islands of light in the big, dark lot. Whoever the previous driver had been, nameplate long gone from the door. He'd clearly spent too many nights staring at highway lines and letting his imagination run. Andre wasn't superstitious. Rules kept you from getting sloppy. Ghost stories didn't. Back in the cab, he pulled out onto the interstate again. The rest area dropped away into the night, replaced by the steady rhythm of pavement seams under his tires. Mile marker Saint-Quatre-Vingts slid past. He forgot about the notebook for a while, lost in thought and the low, reassuring growl of the engine. By the time he remembered, mile 183 was almost on him. The billboard appeared in his headlights like a doorway in the dark, tall, rectangular. Its face a sheet of blank, black wood. No advertisement, no graffiti, no torn corners of paper. Just emptiness. Andre's passenger mirror caught a sliver of it, reflecting the shape as they drew alongside. He thought of the neat block letters. Do not look in your passenger mirror as you go by. His fingers twitched. He could look. Of course he could look. It was just a stupid note from a man he'd never met. A man whose truck he now owned. There was no power in ink on paper to tell him where to rest his eyes. The urge to glance was sharp and sudden. He kept his gaze pinned forward, on the glow of his headlights eating up the road. In the corner of his vision, the mirror stayed a flat oblong of night and faint silver lines. He passed the sign. It dropped behind him. Something small in his chest unclenched. See? He said aloud, more for the quiet cab than for himself. Nothing. The radio fizzed. then cleared again. At mile 197, the talk show host's voice cut off mid-sentence. One moment he was droning about callers and traffic accidents. The next, the speakers filled with a low, even hiss. No pop, no gradual fade. Just sound gone, replaced by static. Andre frowned and reached for the volume. The note from the glove box rose in his mind with unwelcome clarity. At mile 197, if your radio goes to static, do not try to change the station. Do not turn it off. He paused. The static wasn't loud. It was almost soothing, a white noise blanket under the hum of the truck. His fingers rested on the dial for a moment, then drew back. He left it. For a few minutes, it was only him, the soft hiss of the radio, and the dark. Then, gradually, a different sound threaded through the static. Not words, not music, more like the distant impression of a crowd layered voices too far away to distinguish. A murmur, just below the edge of understanding. Occasionally there was a sharper tone, like a laugh, or a short, surprised exclamation, swallowed quickly by the wash of noise. He focused on the white lines instead, on the thin sway of his trailer in the mirrors. The mile markers slipped by. The sensation passed. The static softened. Then the talk show host's voice slid back in mid-word, as if nothing had happened. Andre let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Coincidence, he muttered. Still, when his hand drifted toward the glove box again, he didn't stop it. At the next stretch of empty highway, he popped it open and pulled the notebook into his lap. Rule 3. At mile 204, you'll feel like you hit a bump you didn't see. That's okay. Don't stop to check. There's nothing under your tires you can help. He flicked his eyes to the roadside. The next green sign slid into view. Mile 203. The world narrowed. His hands felt very precise on the wheel. The road ahead looked flat and clean. The moon had come out from behind the clouds, laying a soft silver wash over the fields. Mile 204. His headlights rolled over the sign. Half a second later, the whole truck lurched with a hollow thump, as if one of his tires had run over something solid lodged in the pavement. The shock jolted up through the steering column. His heart jumped. Instinct dragged his eyes to the mirrors, searching for a retread, a scrap of blown tire, a dead animal. The asphalt behind him looked smooth. No debris, no dark shape crumpling in the shoulder. His foot twitched toward the brake, then froze. Don't stop to check. He pictured himself pulling onto the shoulder, climbing down with his flashlight, walking back along the trailer while the night pressed close. He imagined shining the beam on... What? Exactly? There's nothing under your tires you can help. He kept moving. The truck smoothed out. The hum of the tires found its rhythm again. After a mile, he realized his jaw was tight enough to ache. He forced it to relax. By the time midnight came and went, he'd read a half-dozen more entries. The author of the notebook never identified himself by name, but occasional details peeked through. A mention of 25 winters on the same run, of a daughter who'd stopped returning his calls, of a dispatch office that had changed logos 3 times, but never changed the coffee. Some rules were simple. Don't honk at the man walking along the median at mile 219. Don't answer if someone on the CB calls you by the wrong name between exits 210 and 212. Others were stranger. If your high beams pick up another version of your own truck facing you in the distance, don't brake. It's not you. It's not now. Andre rolled his eyes at that one, then found himself glancing extra carefully at every far-off pair of headlights that appeared. He made it through the plain stretch without seeing anything that blatant. But the quiet, the emptiness, and the knowledge that someone had seen enough to catalog rules for this road made his thoughts loop. At 2:19 a.m., somewhere between mile markers he'd stopped tracking consciously, his phone lit up where it sat in its holder. Incoming call. Unknown. He didn't move at first. It kept buzzing, the screen pulsing faintly in the dark cab. His radio had gone quiet again, not static this time, just silence between segments. The number wasn't listed. The location line under it said, restricted. His dash clock flipped, digits soft. Ardien Archiven. The rule came back clear and cold. If your phone rings between 2:21 and 2:24 a.m., no matter what, do not answer it. It buzzed again, insistent. 10, 15 seconds. He told himself it could be anything. A wrong number. An emergency. Dispatch with a load change. That last thought hooked him more than it should. The ring cut off. Relief slid through him. Then it began again. Same number, same blank location. The clock still read 2:21. Not picking up, he muttered. Out of habit, his eyes flicked. To the caller ID one more time. The name field had changed. Incoming call. Andre. Home. He froze. He hadn't saved his name that way in his own contacts. His phone simply had a number listed as home tied to his small duplex off I-55. No name. No custom label. The screen buzzed in his palm now. He hadn't even realized he'd picked it up. The clock on the dash stayed fixed at 2:21, though he could feel time passing, the length of the ring stretching on. He watched the green ACFT button glow at him. Patient. The notebook lay open on the passenger seat, pages rustling slightly in the air from the vents. One line on the current page seemed darker than the rest, as if freshly written. Whatever you hear, do not answer. His thumb hovered over the screen. The ringtone cut off mid-note. The call dropped. No missed call notification appeared. The phone's display slid back to his normal home screen. The digital clock in the corner, reading 2:25. Andre set the phone carefully back in its cradle. His heart pounded so hard it made his fingers tap against the wheel to bleed off the nervous energy. He risked a quick glance at the passenger seat. The handwriting on the page in the notebook was the same as always. The ink didn't look fresh. There was no smudge where a new line might have been added. He flipped forward. Near the back, sandwiched between a list of strange instructions and a rough sketch of an interchange, something new caught his eye. Tonight, 10/14. White Freightliner, auction plates, driver, Andre. His breath stalled. He hadn't told anyone about the route except dispatch and his girlfriend. Neither would have scribbled it in a stranger's notebook. Below his name, the words continued. You'll want to think you're smarter than me. You probably are. But the road out here doesn't care about smart. It cares about patterns. Don't break them in the wrong places. At mile 233, the last rule, Andre flipped ahead. The pages thinned as he neared the back of the notebook. Many were blank. The second to last page held a single line. Mile 233. When you see the overpass with no road on it, kill your headlights for 3 seconds. Just 3. Don't steer. Don't brake. Don't blink. If you don't, something else will turn them off for longer. He blinked. What overpass with no road? He said aloud. That doesn't even make sense. His GPS showed the same bland stretch of highway ahead. No exit ramps, no interchanges, just a straight line. The odometer ticked. The night through the windshield stayed the same. Dark, empty, the suggestion of fences and occasional trees. After what felt like 20 minutes, but was probably less, the next green sign appeared. Mile 231. He tried to tell himself that he didn't have to do this. That the previous driver, whoever he had been, had clearly gone off the deep end. That following his rules was giving power to superstitions that didn't deserve it. He also knew that he had obeyed every major one so far, almost without meaning to, and nothing he had seen since had truly contradicted them. Mile 232. Up ahead, something pale rose out of the dark, arching across the road like the ghost of a bridge. At first, Andre thought it was fog, but it had clear edges, a concrete span with no railings, columns that dove into the ground on either side of the interstate, and nothing above or below them. No connecting roads. No ramps. Just a bridge to nowhere, suspended over the highway like a thought someone had half finished and abandoned. His mouth went dry. He checked his speed. 58. Steady. The truck hummed along. Unbothered. He could pass under it with his lights on. See exactly how cracked the concrete was. Search for engineer signs. Reassure himself it was just some aborted project the state had never completed. Or, he could do what the notebook said. He reached for the headlight switch. His fingers hovered there, shaking very slightly. 3 seconds, he whispered. You can count to 3. You've driven in worse. The bridge loomed closer, its shadow cutting a darker bar across the already black sky. He clicked the lights off. The world vanished. The cab fell into an instant, suffocating black. The faint glow from the dash didn't touch the space ahead of him. The feeling of motion surged as his body lost the anchor of visible road. The engine's rumble grew huge and omnipresent. "One," he said between his teeth. In the dark, there was suddenly another sound, a rushing, like wind passing close by at speed, but not wind. He had the clear, impossible sense of something massive sliding just above the roof of his cab, close enough that if he'd had his hand out the window, it would have brushed his knuckles. Two. The smell in the cab shifted for a heartbeat. Not diesel, not road dust. Something older. Damp. Like long, wet concrete and stale. Trapped air. Something tapped the roof softly. Once. Twice. Like fingertips counting with him. 3. He flicked the lights back on. The bridge was already behind him, shrinking in his mirrors. The road ahead lay clear and empty. His tires tracked straight in the lane. He dragged in a breath that felt like it filled his whole chest and throat. In his side mirror, for a flicker of an instant, he thought he saw another truck riding beside his own reflection. Same make, same model, same streaks in the white paint. In the driver's seat of that ghosted twin, a figure sat with both hands on the wheel, head turned toward him. The face was his. Then the mirror showed only what it always showed. His trailer, the faint gleam of reflective tape, the pale smear of highway. He pulled on to the next exit he came to, a tiny truck stop with 3 fuel islands and a handful of parking spaces. Under the harsh canopy lights, the truck looked ordinary again. The notebook in his lap felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. Inside, over burnt coffee and a microwave sandwich, he asked the night cashier about the overpass. "The what?" the man said, scanning the wrapper. "Oh, that ghost bridge back there? Yeah, they poured that in the 80s. Meant to build a connector to Highway 9. Funding fell through. Locals say you shouldn't drive under it after midnight. Folks used to park up top and, well, they say some never came back down. Just stories, though." Andra nodded slowly. On his way back to the truck, he paused by the driver's door and looked at the cab as if seeing it new. Someone had scratched a name faintly into the paint below the window, the letters nearly polished out by time and hands and washes. Up close, in the angled glow of the overhead light, he could make them out. T. Grady. He'd seen that name before, on a memorial plaque in a company lobby, years back, for a driver who had died en route after 3 decades of service. He hadn't connected it until now. Back in the cab, he opened the notebook to the very last page. Blank. He held his pen over it for a long moment, listening to the idle of the engine, the faint, distant laughter from a pair of drivers outside, the cheap TV playing in the truck stop lounge. Then, in neat block letters, he wrote, "If you're reading this, you've got this truck now. You'll hear things. You'll see things. Don't ignore them, but don't let them drive for you either. Next time you take the planes at night, pay attention at mile 233. And if your phone calls you by your own name when it shouldn't know it, let it ring." He paused, then added one more line, smaller than the rest. "I think some roads remember us. I think some trucks remember too. Be careful what you teach them." He closed the notebook and put it back in the glove box. The next night, running a different highway under a different sky, he left the radio on and his headlights where they belonged. He didn't go looking for ghost bridges or calls that came at wrong times, but whenever the road signs changed and the dark closed in, he occasionally reached out and patted the dash of his truck now, and felt, in the subtle click of the plastic and the whisper of the engine, something like another hand tapping back, counting the miles with him.